Hello and welcome back to Prism and Company. My name is Colin, and on the docket today, I want to have a heart-to-heart with you. Just me and you and I, tete-a-tete. Have a little tarot dance, if you will. You see, person watching YouTube, whom I adore, I'm having a tough time with something. Specifically, the Tarot of the Spirit. This is a deck that I have had since basically the beginning of my tarot journey. It's been a hot minute since I've bought the Tarot of the Spirit. We've been through some good times, some bad times, some laughs, some cries. I'm going to tell you about all of it. But I think it might be time for it to go. And quite frankly, that makes me sad because I really like this deck. But on the same token, I hold my collection to a very specific and high standard. And it's only in my own eyes that this standard lives. But still, it's something that is so important to me that I want every deck to really bring me joy and really feel additive. And I'm just not sure if this deck does. So let's take a look at it. We're going to examine the pros, examine the cons, and just kind of see what this deck has to offer and look at a lot of the beautiful cards along the way. If this deck ends up leaving, this will be a lovely last look at it. If it ends up staying, this will be a beautiful reminder as to why this deck deserves a spot amongst the cards. It's going to be great. I hope you enjoy. We're going to keep it casual this time, and I'm really looking forward to it. But first, cue the intro. It has been a long time since I've had Tarot of the Spirit. When I first started Tarot, I got the Revelations Tarot. That was my very first one. Then I got the Thoth. And then I kind of experimented finding some different decks here and there, sort of intermittently. And Tarot of the Spirit was like among that first wave. And I don't know about you, the first decks that I got, most of them, I couldn't stand now, and they have made their way out of the collection. I didn't really know what I was looking for, so I was just kind of seeing like, just a little bit more, and kind of taking here and there. But the Tarot of the Spirit's one that really stuck around. As you can see, my copy of the Tarot of the Spirit is trimmed. Normally this white border would go all the way around, and you can see, again, that white border would go all the way around on the back. I always thought that it was a little too restricted. If we take a look at a card here, you can see I left the name and the number on, but I trimmed the sides. The very first copy of this deck I got, I trimmed all the way around. I'm like, I just want the art. I want it to really pop off the page, which was so cool. But I was cutting off beautiful and lovely keywords, and I also couldn't tell which card was which. So it was a disaster. I got it through like 3 cards, realized it was a horrible idea, couldn't untrim the deck, and proceeded to throw it away. And I wouldn't let myself buy it again for many moons because I was embarrassed, just self-embarrassed. Finally, years later, I let myself get the deck again. I was so excited to have it back and just kind of live and breathe with it for a while. I even made my own box for it because I was also in the mode where I was throwing my boxes away all the time. And you'll see the court cards are one thing that really, really inspired me about this deck. So I chose to make my box out of all the court cards. There's our little, Significator card. That's the one. And then the 4 of Pentacles randomly on the bottom because I think that card's really beautiful too. So it's a deck I care a lot about, enough to, craft something custom for it and trim it. It's a lot of work, and it definitely warranted all the work because I really just loved it so much. Speaking of, the thing I like the most about the deck has to be and will always be the court cards. These are some of the most beautiful court cards I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, why do I say that? They speak to so many things that I like about tarot and art in general. They are very abstract. Take the Brother of Wind here. We have this figure kind of pulling itself apart. We can see muscle and tissue. The arm, it almost looks like a bone dissolving into geometry. Gosh, even looking at this card, I'm like, how could I ever get rid of the Tarot of the Spirit? Look at this. Let's take a look at the Brother of Water, for example. This one, we can see the chakras running up through, this beautiful water, these explosions of color behind. but all of it's very gestural and smeary. There's not a ton of detail happening. It's all about the individual colors and strokes of paint coming together to kind of form this greater whole. Even the mother of water here, we see these beautiful, almost like Christmas lights strung across with this vacant face behind this veil of glowing light. It's so gorgeous. I can't get over specifically these court cards, how gorgeous they are. Now, there's a few more. These are probably my favorite ones here, but these ones too, like they do such a good job at breathing life into the image, feeling like they're abstract, feeling like they're interesting and complex, but also very gestural, interesting, complex, and also helpful, additive. The images really read like the court cards. Can you tell I'm rambling? I literally got distracted by how pretty the pictures on these cards were, and here we are. And now we're doing this together. We're having this aside moment. Thank you for this aside moment. This has been an aside moment with Colin Campbell. But it's not all this, and that's the problem. If the deck was all this, it might be my favorite deck in my whole collection. And here I am being like, I might get rid of it. There's some weird stuff. There's some kind of 90s jank in this. Jank does not scare me though. I think good decks are built on a foundation of jank. For example, let's take a look at the other court cards that I didn't mention. I think that these ones are kind of weak, and that's coming from some of my favorite court cards of all time. These ones feel a little more piecemeal and kind of patched together. Their compositions feel hasty and unfinished. Take, for example, the Sister of Fire. We have this figure who's kind of blossoming into a flower at the bottom. Their arm is exploding into whiteness, but none of it feels crisp and clean. It kind of feels like she messed up the arm, so she just painted a bunch up here and didn't quite finish the canvas at the bottom. Same deal with the Father of Fire. That looks like blank white canvas to me. There isn't the love and attention and the detail. The Father of Water is cool, but what the heck is happening with his body? It's so weird. Is that like a leg that's coming down there? Like, you name an appendage that is happening right here and it's weird, like in relationship to that head. It's so bizarre. The Mother of Fire, the lion ends up getting kind of janky. There's a lot of haunch happening. This like weird pod thing. The colors are a little bit whatever. Now, before I go too far, I want to say that I really, really love this deck. And I do not mean to, insult it or be too critical of it. This is really just me kind of talking back and forth whether I want to keep it or not. So if you really love this deck and these cards, please know I'm not trying to, call you out or throw you under the bus at all. They're just not my flavor. Oh, but the court cards. So, not that I'm really keeping score, but if I was, the court cards are both a point for and against. Oh, a little crumble. For and against the deck. It's definitely stacked in the for category because the good ones are like the best court cards, and the bad ones are fine. But let's see some other parts of this deck that might help me decide. My rambly videos tend not to be very popular, so I think this is going to be one just for me. If you're still watching, welcome. I hope you enjoy the whole ride, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. These are some more cards that I find are very, very strong and always pull me back into the deck. These cards consistently show interesting texture and color across the entire composition, unlike some of those last court cards that we saw that seemed unfinished or didn't quite have the whole image put together. Their shapes are both abstract, but also very additive. For example, the garden here, let me zoom it on in a little bit. We have some maybe foliage kind of at top, but we have some triangles as well. Nothing is explicitly saying, I'm a tree, I'm a flower, I'm a bush, but we're getting the idea of what it is. And also, this very flat image is really doing a good job of showing us space. Our shapes are overlapping, so these triangle forms and this line are very clearly in front of this brown piece at the back. Even some of our pentacles are kind of overlapping each other, showing us that that stone is kind of pushed out a little bit. It's really, really cool. I think the colors are beautiful on it too. And the aces, oh mama, let's take a look at some more of those aces, because holy free holies. We're taking a look at one of Earth there. Do I have any more aces pulled? I don't, but they're all really, really gorgeous. And the Magus over here, again, with kind of like some, realistic rendering of forms, but also a ton of abstraction. That arm just blurring off into electricity. Positively gorgeous. And this kind of mix of abstract and realism is the kind of art that I like to make, so I'm maybe a little biased, but it's also just done really, really well. And the use of color and texture and shape in these cards is so cool. This interior of the Four of Water, the flood here, it looks like a cityscape at night. We have this beautiful dark sky, we have little pockets of light, and almost like reflections over the water. And then just these cascading streams of water that are not only pouring down over this golden ring, but also obscuring it like water would, kind of diffusing and refracting the light to make it bend and change. I think it's so, so cool. Oh. And again, every time I look at the good parts of this deck, I think, how could I possibly get rid of it? They are so incredible. But this is it. The cards that I just showed you are the ones that I went through and I was like, these are the ones that save the deck for me. These, 15 cards or so. And that, of course, includes the really good court cards, too. But not everything is up to that standard. Actually, I'm going to show you two things at once here. One of the things that really kind of drives me nuts about this deck are some of the really, really flat cards. So let's take a look here at like the 7 of Fire, 6 of Earth, 4 of Fire, 9 of Fire, 9 of Earth, 9 of Fire. These cards don't have that consistent texture across them. They seem much more quilted almost, or patchwork. And not that there's anything wrong with it. They're just up against these beautiful textural masterpieces. And we can see here a lot of them get really, really flat. Look at how different the shapes are in the Devil here compared to the Hermit. This Hermit feels rich and full of depth. We can see darkness, we can see light, we can see shading on the face. This is literally just blocks of color that are flat. It's kind of on two different playing fields. Here are a couple more of those. This one's also just bizarre. It looks fleshy, almost like the underside of a tentacle with suction cups on it. I've never loved this card, but it's not particularly flat. It's just weird. This flatness, I don't love it. It's so dissonant from the beautiful movement and the color compositions and the things that I love so much about the good cards in this deck, that when I see them, it makes me sigh because I know the quality these cards could be, and these ones just aren't living up in my mind, and that really creates kind of a little red flag for me. I said I was going to talk about two things, though. I want to continue to talk about this flatness because I'm about to talk out of both sides of my mouth, because there are some cards in this deck that are very, very flat, but for some reason I think are way more successful. The Fountain of Love here. This is not the most flat card in the deck, but it's also not the most dynamic. 4 of Wind, though. Let me pick these up. 10 of Earth and the 3 of Earth. These cards are all horrendously flat. This is almost no texture. It is that exact patchwork that I just critiqued, and yet I think that card is wonderful. It's one of my favorite in the deck. 10 of Earth, I think it's super cool. I think the colors and the composition and the way it's constructed, which is the composition, thank you, Colin, really, really fire on all cylinders. Why do I like these cards and not other ones? Nostalgia, maybe? This is the first card I saw online from Tarot of the Spirit, and I was always very intrigued by it. This was the first card that I trimmed and was like, oh no, I've made a mistake. So I've always had a soft spot for it. Plus, I love rainbows. I think butterflies are super cool. And I don't know, I guess another rainbow. And I just think it looks great. That, at the end of the day, sometimes that's all it is. It just kind of tickles my fancy in a way that is sometimes hard to quantify, especially when I'm just musing endlessly to my living room. I think it's a wonderful thing to do. So these are 4 cards that have the critique of the deck that I talked about and also really pull me towards it. So it also frustrates me to see, say, the 3 of Earth next to the 5 of Earth. I think this card is wonderfully successful. I find this card to be messy and a little off-putting. Hey, you, get out of there. And let's say I draw these two cards together, I think, oh, what a beautiful card. Oh, why aren't you a little more like the Three of Coins? And the Five of Earth doesn't deserve that. It's fantastic. This card went to Harvard. It got a law degree. And it's currently practicing for, families of ghost children who need support. And who am I to critique that? Who am I to judge that? I feel that way about a lot of decks, really. As someone who is an artist themselves, it's often easy for me to critique another artist's work. And sometimes I forget that they probably love all these images, equally, or there's folks who love them all out there too. So it's not my flavor, but I have to respect them. Boy, this one really is getting rambly, folks. If you're sticking with me this far, again, welcome. Thank you. It's been a great time. Let's take a look at a few more cards and see what we got going. We've come to kind of the big crux of this whole thing. I don't mind having janky or lesser quality cards in a deck. Honestly, I really don't. I've got a bunch of decks like that, and I feel like I usually call out those cards. This whole chunk, though, is like really meh. I feel not excited by these. They're not good. They're not bad. Like this one's actually kind of cool. It's got a nice little flow to it. But they don't make me feel the same thing that the really strong cards do. And that would be okay if this wasn't the biggest stack of cards in the deck. These ones to me just kind of float somewhere in the middle. And to me, that's what it feels like this deck has kind of come down to. It just sort of floats in the middle. And the things that used to make it really special, actually, I take it back. Those aces are super awesome. The things that used to make it super special are no longer able to hold it up. Oh, it's the five. So was that an ace? And that's kind of it. I think it's very telling that after going through this whole deck and seeing the good, the bad, these are a couple of cards I pulled out that I really don't care for. The figures are very bizarre, so we'll end on a bit of a sour note. I don't feel super drawn to it anymore. It is a kind of kill your darlings moment. This deck is nostalgic for me. It started my tarot journey in many ways. It's a deck that I learned with. It's a deck that has, got a story behind it with the whole trimming business and buying a couple of copies. And it's one that I just don't know if I like anymore. And just like our food tastes change, our tarot tastes change over time as well. And I think it just makes me sad, because wouldn't it be cool if the things that we liked for our whole lives, and it became this beautiful, cacophonous nest of just love and remembrance and good times. But it doesn't always happen that way. And I'm not overly sad about it. I think that there is a time and a place for everything. And just because this deck isn't really doing it for me now does not mean that it wasn't a fantastic deck in its time and can't be a fantastic deck for somebody else. I think I've made my decision, folks. And I bet you know what that decision is. It's time to move on the Tarot of the Spirit. But what a lovely, fond walk down memory lane this was. And it's the kind of deck that I will look at online or maybe watch a walkthrough of every now and then and be like, ooh, those court cards though, especially those court cards. Now that I know I'm moving this one on, it's time for like the awkward message moment. The Tarot Awards are coming up, folks. And spoiler alert, Tarot of the Spirit's nominated for some pretty spicy ones. And it's doing pretty well. So this deck that may or may not be in my collection tomorrow might just win a couple of awards. We shall see. Now, a deck does not have to be in my collection to win an award. That's actually a lie, because the way I'm doing the Tarot Awards, it's only my collection. But I have no problem honoring the Tarot of the Spirit for the things that it does just wonderfully. Thank you so much for joining me, folks. It's really been a pleasure. And if you made it through this one, I'm completely baffled, because Well, I see the YouTube analytics and nobody does. If you did, drop me a comment. Say hi. Tell me that you made it to the end and I'll draw you a badge of honor. It'll be great. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time and have a wonderful rest of your day.